VOCM Mornings. Now, the provincial government is outlining some of the action being taken to address violence prevention in Newfoundland and Labrador. VOCM's Linda Swain spoke with Pam Parsons. She's the Minister of Women and Gender Equality in the province. And the province is now reaching the halfway point of its 4-year agreement with the federal government on a national action plan to end gender-based violence.
$13.6 million over the course of several years, and that is to support the implementation of the National Action Plan to end gender-based violence. And what this does, this gives an opportunity where tailor-made initiatives from Newfoundland and Labrador, that money comes through me, through my office, and it goes to these stakeholder organizations. And as you mentioned, yes, Men and Boys, the Lonely Man Project in particular, in collaboration with the Canadian Mental Health Association, they're offering what's called the Harbour Strong Project. And that takes an approach to, to have these conversations with men and boys, because as we know, society has this expectation of how men should be, with regards to masculinity, and discussing. So, their feelings and how they approach life. And Bill Jeffrey, I have to give a hats off to him. He's done fabulous work, with these initiatives. But it's about including men and boys in the conversation, and about healthy relationships. It's about all stakeholders in this province, because we all play a part to do our part to ultimately end gender-based violence. It's about having those conversations. It doesn't work, and it doesn't happen in silos. We know that violence does not occur in silos. So it's across governments, it's across industry, it's ultimately across our society to do our part.
When we think about gender-based violence, we think primarily men perpetrating violence against women or girls. But is it important now to expand that conversation, because we've seen so many horrific high-profile cases over the decades involving boys specifically who were targeted?
Absolutely. It's not. We know statistics show that it's mostly women, Indigenous women, and gender diverse individuals who are on the opposite end of the unfortunate end of gender-based violence. Statistics prove that, but we do know that men are also victims. Men can also be victims of gender-based violence. So it's about widening, it's about educating, it's about becoming informed for everyone to have these conversations, because it is a crisis. It certainly is an epidemic in our province as well as across the country, and Linda, I would say across the world, what we're seeing in other countries and jurisdictions. So the onus is on everyone. But with regards to the National Action Plan, significant funding in the way of support has come to our province to go to organizations such as the crisis hotlines, for example. We just announced $700,000 in funding to support crisis hotlines here in Newfoundland and Labrador. And these lines are a lifeline, ultimately, for survivors of gender-based violence, and are critical supports for services. And there's also a texting option. We know someone may be in that moment and have a small window to call for help. And if actually sending a text is safer than making that phone call, that option is there. And this funding to end sexual violence NL, and it went to the Transitional House Association of Newfoundland and Labrador, that's providing more robust services, resources, and support to serve the urgent needs of those experiencing the sexual and gender-based violence. And also Quadrangle is another organization that I'm happy to announce funding for $890,000 for Quadrangle. It's being provided over 4 years to enhance violence prevention efforts, including education and, of course, awareness initiatives. Women's shelters also receiving funding. The Public Legal Information Association of Newfoundland and Labrador, $300,000 was recently announced for the Journey Project to ultimately provide free access to legal advice for victims who otherwise may not afford. And as we know, these barriers are in place that actually stop people and prevent people from getting the help that they need. So again, I can't say enough about the people on the front lines, or the experts, the stakeholders, and I'm happy to be their minister to help put the resources in their hands to help them do this very important work to ultimately serve the people who depend on these services.
We're familiar with a lot of these groups, of course. Are the programs making a difference? What kind of a difference are they making?
Well, the feedback that I have been receiving is that the funding, the resources are ultimately giving them the tools to do this work. We do know that statistics here in Labrador alone had the highest statistics of gender-based violence for Indigenous women and girls. And two-spirited, then that's higher than the national average. But, we are making a difference, I guess, in the way of resources. But again, this is something that we're going to have to, it's not just simply a month of awareness that we talk about this, that we work about this. It's something that we do every day. Every week we're in touch with stakeholders. And again, I can't emphasize enough that it's everyone's responsibility. All government departments, schools, industry, even sitting home with your family. The onus is on each and every one of us. I'd like to think that we are making a difference, but, there's a long way to go. And ultimately, we want to end gender-based violence here in Newfoundland and Labrador.
And that is the Minister of Women and Gender Equality in Newfoundland and Labrador. That is Pam Parsons speaking with VOCM's Linda Swain.